Good evening and welcome to Queeries. I'm Brian, your host, and with me I have special guest, John-MichaelLander.
Hey.
How long have we known each other?
Oh, I don't know, 20 years?
20 years.
But we're only 29.
Exactly. I mean, it's
So
just
we were
time.
9 when we met.
We're 9 years old. We've been best friends since 9, right? Exactly. It's amazing how time flies, or something. So at any rate, but it's fantastic to have you here on the show because I was so excited when a while back you announced that you had become a published author.
Yes.
And it's very awesome. And you wrote the book Surface Tension.
Correct.
And you can hold it up if you want, so that way everyone can see it. There it is, Surface Tension, water and everything. Kind of goes with the whole swimming.
The diving, yes.
The swimming and diving thing. So first of all, tell everyone, just kind of, in brief, what is this story about?
Well, basically the story is about my year from 15 to 16 years old when I competed for the United States in Tonsberg, Norway. And it basically is sprung off, if we can use that kind of words,
Sure.
from when I actually was having issues teaching. And I taught high school, sophomore years, which was 15, 16-year-olds.
Right.
And I got through a really bad time and started going to see a therapist about why I was having these issues. And it kind of revealed that it all had to deal with the fact that these buttons were being pushed again, and I was watching myself within these 15 and 16-year-olds.
Right.
So then it started to unravel, and we started digging deeper, and we started realizing and decided that it's time to tell the story. I've hidden myself so long,
Sure.
pretending to be how many different people have you seen me as?
Right.
And it's time to say this is really who I am.
And in terms of doing that, because a lot of people, you and I were talking before the show that a lot of people don't realize that we're both introverts.
Right, major
Introverts, which you find odd. I'm on a television show, and you're on here, and you've got a published book. You've done acting.
Yes.
I mean, you've dabbled in just about everything. You're like a true Renaissance man, and and that's what a lot of people don't realize. How, based just solely on that alone, that part of your personality, how difficult was it for you to write this book, and how difficult is it for you to still actually even look at the book and realize you've written the book?
That's a great question, and you're like the first person that's ever asked me that question. Everybody thinks, oh, you wanted to write a book, so you wrote about it. No, this is a research and really digging deep. I get really nervous still thinking about it, knowing like my drive here to you, there's had to be a deep breathing, come on. Acting, which it's funny, we've been in the studio, last time I was here is like 2004, 2005, and we did the soap opera here, which was great. And being a different character is always easy. You're wearing a mask.
Sure.
And you can hide. This kind of, although it's still a fiction, is my life and what happened.
Right.
And to reveal that it's hard. And sometimes I find myself still stumbling over words when people ask me, well, how do you feel about it? I don't know how I feel. One of the things that keep coming up is that, to me, it doesn't seem like a big deal. And then when people who have read come, oh my God, I can't believe you did that, and that happened, and this happened. And I'm like, I guess, yeah, but I lived it. So
Right.
I don't know what's different from this to what you grew up with.
Right.
We can sit here and say, oh, we can compare notes,
Right.
but then when you talk about your childhood, which you did earlier, you were like, just thought this is what I did and this is what I did, So we talk that way,
Right.
because we have divorced ourselves, I think, a little bit from it, to distance ourselves.
Yep.
And so when I wrote the book, it was cathartic in many ways.
Sure.
It was also painful in other ways. My father passed away, so I never got to say what I wanted to say that happens in the book to him.
Right.
So that kind of stuff like that, the personal sides are a little bit frustrating. Also, the book comes out of the fact of being sexually abused at such a young age. And right now, as we see with all our athletes, especially our gymnasts, and actually the diving team now, it's all coming out how these athletes have been abused.
Right.
And no one's allowed to talk about it because we're elite athletes, and that never happens.
Right.
And it's funny to look back at being 15 and 16 when this all was taking place and thinking that I was okay with it. It was cool.
Right.
It wasn't until I got older that I started seeing how it was affecting my life.
Right.
Teaching high school at the same age that was happening to me and seeing the things parallel and then like, oh my God.
Right.
And I think, in my mind, I think young men who have been sexually abused don't have the equipment that young women have because it's not looked at still?
Well, and I think part of it is that the sort of the toxic masculinity that especially in I think Western cultures, but primarily I think here in the U.S. The pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing, that there is absolutely no vocabulary
Right.
for this. I mean, it's wow, this stuff happens, to powerless girls and young women. You're a man.
Right.
What did you? Really? I mean, you let this happen. I mean, you obviously wanted it. So, I mean, that's that's, I think, part of it is that we don't have a vocabulary because we're, and I'm a softie at heart. I mean, I mean.
Both of us.
Yeah, both of us are. So, I mean, and there's a caring side, but there's also then, well, how do I carry this as a man?
Yes.
And what am I supposed to do with it? I don't, so I get exactly where you're coming from, that there's no vocabulary available.
And well, what vocabulary we do have is that we should be celebrated because, we had this experience.
Right.
And I'm sorry, after working with 15 and 16-year-olds, I also realize that they're still mentally not ready.
Right.
And I know we joke about it, and our parents say, "Oh, don't have sex till you're married,"
Right.
and "Oh, I can handle it." But the ramifications we hide, and they slowly start coming out later on.
Right.
Which, again, leads to a lot of other depression and things that we don't understand. And we've blocked it away so far that we don't realize what the elements are that have created this. So we think there's something else happening.
Right.
And we blame everything else instead
Right.
of going back to the core, like, oh, I wasn't ready.
Right. Oh, and honestly, and no one, I think, is ready at that age.
Exactly.
No, I mean, there's no way that you can be. I mean, now for me, my experience was when I was 22. But even then, 22, you're still not, I mean, your brain is still developing up until you're 25. You're technically not out of adolescence until you hit about 30. So any time in that time frame, I think, it can really, warp things, in ways that you don't even understand because like you said, I'm going to divorce myself from myself and what's happened. I'm going to look at it objectively. I'm going to look at it pragmatically, or whatever I'm going to do.
Right.
And that's, I mean, it's, for you, as you were writing this, did you have, I mean, did you actually, as you were writing it, feel like, oh my God, I am completely reliving this? I mean, I'm remembering details and...
Oh, Ryan, yes. You just hit me right now. I just felt it all come flooding back in. Yeah, especially a lot of the stuff that deals with what my parents were.
Right.
And how they perceived and how they presented stuff to me, and being of a lower income family as I grew up in, and being the middle child, and having to fight for the attention of my parents and still not getting that.
Right.
Would be a hard thing that keeps coming back to me when I think about it. And then to the extent that those relationships went to. And I never knew where the boundaries were. I never knew where I was supposed to fit into everything. So when I would be writing, or when I was writing this, it all would definitely come back, and it still does. I could be driving past something, and something will trigger, and I'll go, oh my God, there it is again.
Right.
So I don't know if that helps or answer your question.
No, it does. No, it does.
I feel like we're being so cosmically general and not saying too much.
Well, and I mean, in terms of, do you see the publication of this book and the knowledge that people are reading it, people that you know, people that you don't know, are reading this book, do you consider this book a victory for yourself?
It is a victory to the point that I feel like I'm beginning to learn who I am again. What did I like, and where did I give up my energy, and where did I give up my power to be the nice kid all the time, and just try to be the pleaser all the time. So I see that as a victory. It has alienated me from my family. No one talks to me anymore, which is fine. But then again, I see all these people that are writing to me and sending me messages and pictures, holding it up, the book that they're reading, and saying, oh my God, thank you so much. I know somebody like this, and I can talk to them now, or maybe I can share this with them. And I was on a flight to Canada, And the lady beside me pulls out the book and starts reading it, and I'm thinking, do I tell her that I'm...
Yeah, that's me. That's me right
It
there.
was like, or running down the beach in Topsail Island, and there's the book sitting on a lounge chair, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute.
Right.
This is freaky, but it's kind of cool. And then I thought, do I go back and just sign it for him, or just run off?
Right. Right. That would be hilarious.
And they come back and go, what?
I can see it now that there's an all points bulletin. Someone is randomly signing books that are left out on the beach. We need, I can see it now. That would.
But I will tell you an interesting thing. We kind of did a study, and the group that is reading the book are middle-aged women. The gay community, not so much.
Really?
That's which has really surprised me. I thought this would, be picked up by that. No, straight women, and I don't know why. I don't know what it's about. I mean,
well, I mean, perhaps again, they have the vocabulary, as a part of being, female in this culture and things of that nature, so they can relate to that.
Maybe that's it.
And and I wonder, because I think that, again, maybe it comes down to the fact that it's this toxic male point of view that we have of ourselves,
right?
Kind of thing that no one wants to admit that well, this happened to me, and maybe that's part of it. I don't know, or maybe the communities, to some degree, we've got people that are too self-absorbed that maybe that reading something like this and empathizing with you or the character, what have you, that somehow that's not, I'm not interested in doing that.
Yeah, also I believe there was a woman that was talking to me once and said the thing that I find about the book is the beauty that it has, although it's going through an ugly time, that you're able to still find love and what you need as you're going through it. And of course at the diving championships, meeting the Italian, and of course the lead character thinks, oh my God, this is the dream man of my life, and then I'm going to marry him and move to Italy and all this, and find out later on that this is an unconditional love situation. And that's when I think he starts to realize there are good people, and they're not out just for what they want. They're able to share, and which sets him up for later on when he meets the other person, which is really kind of interesting.
Yeah, and well, and I think it's amazing too. I think maybe it's the overall human spirit, and maybe and for me, for example, I mean, I've never been known to be an optimist. Never, as far as I guess. But
which is so funny, because I see the optimism in you all the time.
And I don't, because it's like, it's like I've joked with people that I see, I'm not a glass half empty or half full, but I'm looking down at a puddle on the floor wondering where the hell my glass is.
It's right here, buddy. Take it.
Indeed,
fill it
there we go.
But
I think that, and maybe it's something special about, because like you being, really you're an empathetic person, very empathetic. And I think that for people like us, even in the midst of awful, there's a desperate need for us to find something that's beautiful.
You're absolutely right. I think you're right.
And I think that's very important, because maybe it's a way of just realizing that, this is, on some level, we understand that, my God, this is horrific what I'm going through right now, but I've got to have something that I can hold on to that is at least beautiful to help get me through this one day at a time, whatever that might be.
I love the way you put that. That's really nice. My second book just got picked up.
Which I was going to bring that up. I'm so excited.
It's called Spandau Ballet, and it's exactly what you just talked about. It's set in the Holocaust, and it's a German soldier who wanted to be a concert pianist, but he was the epitome of the Aryan race.
Right.
So he was handpicked basically for the youth movement. And the whole time, it's about his experience of going through that and how he finds this inmate when he gets into the concentration camp. And I think it's one of the most beautiful stories I've ever written, just because of the love that happens between these two humans. But yet it's covered with all this darkness.
Right.
And I'm excited for it to come out. I don't know how people are going to react. It's going to be interesting. But it continues that philosophy that you were just saying.
Yeah, well, and I mean, maybe it's like I said, maybe it is the human condition, because I mean, really, I mean, we are a communal species. We thrive on interaction, we thrive on communication, we thrive on connection.
Exactly. And I don't care who you are, you still thrive for romance somehow in there.
Oh, indeed, yes.
You know, we could be the most pessimistic person in the world, but there's still that little what if, you know, and it's there. It's because, like you said, we're communal and we need that.
Well, and I think I think the other thing that, you know, happens is that people joke that I'm such a cynical bastard because in many respects I am.
I don't think I've met that side of you.
Oh, well, I think I've kept that cynical bastard kind of hidden, kind of thing.
Okay.
You know, as far as try to keep that under control. But you know, even with that, I think that again, sort of, there's always that little kernel of hope.
A little twinkle in your eye, dude.
Did I twinkle?
You did. You went.
Did
yeah,
it
I
twinkle?
got it. I saw it.
Hopefully that didn't show up on the camera.
Oh, I hope it did.
Yeah.
I hope it did.
But there's always that small kernel of hope that, you know, that there is going to be some sort of romantic something or other, and that it doesn't have to be like it is in the movies.
Exactly.
Because in the movies it's all bullshit.
Oh, definitely.
You know, pardon my French, you might have to blank that out there, Randy. But yeah, it is, because that's not really, that's all made up and whatnot. But there, you know, I think that, you know, to a degree, you writing that book and getting it published is almost kind of a romantic act in a way. Yes. It's you. Number one, it's you loving you.
Wow. Okay.
It's also you, sort of, you know, romantically giving this to people. And you know, this is me. This is my experience. This is how I've come out of this, kind of thing. So I think it's a romance between the people that, you know, are, you know, that purchase your book, and it's also you loving you.
Wow. Can I?
Sure, if you feel free. I mean,
Awesome.
I don't copyright it. So, but no, I think that's what made in a way this horror story, which, you know, there's horror in here. I mean, you know,
I guess again, I'm so
you're
numb
kind of,
to it. I can't.
right.
I don't see the horror as like you see it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, I can, you know, I can see that, and then I see it through the lens of my own experience,
Right, exactly.
which magnifies it.
Oh.
To a degree.
Okay.
You know, as far as that goes, and that's not a bad thing.
Right.
But I think that, you know, again, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I love to write. If you've seen any of my Facebook posts, you know that I'm, you know, anything under 5,000 characters is probably very rare. If I'm passionate about something.
And beautifully though, you write beautifully.
Well, I don't know if I do or not. I'll take your word for it.
Okay.
I'll take your word for it. But,
thank you.
You know, I think that writing is such a difficult thing to begin with. You know, where I don't. Did you ever agonize like over an individual word, like what word? Because one word can change the meaning of something. So
yes.
even whether subtle or not, it still can change the meaning. Did you have trouble with that?
Several times, yeah, throughout the whole thing. And you go back and you'll reread it. I can go back in now and say, oh God, why did I use that word? Or why did I use this phrase? And wish that I could fix it. But then there comes that time you have to let it go.
Right.
And I think that was the breaking point for me when I finally just said, I have to let this go.
Right.
And once I let it go, there was this relief.
Right.
And it's kind of funny now that when people say, well, tell me who you are, I said, read the book. You'll find out all about me.
Right.
It's easier for you to read that than me to try to tell you.
Sure.
Because I still will color it so that I can survive.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense.
Where this, with the editors from Page Publishing, they wouldn't let that happen. Every time there came a part where it was like, especially, I don't know if the high school, trying to leave and getting a nice little visit by 3 friends, they made me go back and rewrite that because they said, you're lying. You're making it sound like it was okay for what they did.
Right.
Now go back and do it again. And I was like, what? No, no.
You don't understand. You don't understand.
And I think the hardest part to write, there were 2 other parts that really were hard, was when my father picked me up from a diving practice and he decided to take a long way home. And the incident that happens as he pulls off to the side of the road is like, you know, I keep asking myself, did this really happen? Did this really happen? Or am I making this up? And but the vivid images are there.
Sure.
You know, and so that was one of those freeing moments when it was, again, me taking care of him after what had happened. And then the final, when I actually did win the gold medal and I called home and my father said, this is the worst joke anyone's ever pulled, my son would never win a World Games, and hung up on me. And there I am in front of all these cameras and people taking, you know, I had to pretend that the phone was still on.
Right.
Because I was like, I can't hang up now because they're going to ask what he says, and what am I going to say?
Right.
So you start creating all these little, I don't know, colorings that will make you feel good so that you can present yourself to everybody else.
Right.
And they stripped that from me a lot. They said, bring it back. And also the therapist, who is a real person.
Right.
She's amazing. Anybody needs one, let me know. I could set you up with her. Really stripped the onion peels back. And she caught me on a lot of stuff. Saying,
yes, they won't let you. They won't let you. You know, even with mine, it's like, nope, that's BS.
Well, this is the first woman or therapist I met that did this to me.
Right.
Because everyone else, I felt like I could
They're,
charm them away.
Right,
and
then they're like they're petting you, and
yeah,
it's
you're
okay.
like, give them what they want, and you walk out and you're like, I didn't touch anything.
Right, exactly. No, that's, well, you know, I commend anyone who puts themselves out there, you know, in writing, and no matter what the writing, but especially for people that are recounting and reliving, you know, a dark moment in time or dark moments in time, because it's visceral, it's real. It speaks to all that can be ugly about humanity, and it also speaks to all the beauty that can be in humanity.
Yes.
And that, you know, people do survive by hook or by crook, but, you know, and some don't make it.
That's right.
Some just don't.
Sometimes it comes down to that choice, and that's the hardest thing.
Yep.
Now, there are 2 more books that go with this, and they're different phases. There's the LA years, when I was out in LA, and then finally it revolves all the way back to Dayton and the life that I have now and how it all has come around full circle.
Very awesome. Well, I've always thought you're just a special human being. You really are.
Too.
You are. You always have been. And again, putting yourself out there like that, that's a lot of courage, and that's a lot of self-love. And you know, it's read the book, people. let me just put it out there. Read the book. So we'll be right back, and we'll finish up.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for Gnoming Around. I'm Mike the Gnome. I'm going to bring to you some information for a very popular perennial to zones 4 to 9, the lily. I'm going to briefly touch on the major varieties and types of lilies and some basic information for each. First is the Asiatic lily. These are by far the easiest lilies to grow. They're also the earliest lilies to bloom, generally mid to late spring. This variety doesn't tend to have a scent, but they do have the widest variety of colors. The height of the Asiatic lily can range from 2 to 4 feet. There are also miniature versions that only get to about a foot or so tall. These do well in complete full sun or low sun locations. Mine do very well in a run along a fence that only gets 2 to 4 hours of sun a day. Our second variety is probably the most sought after, is the Oriental lily. This lily is much taller than the Asiatic, with most being between 3 and 6 feet tall. They bloom later in midsummer mostly. Their blooming colors range from the light reds and pinks to the whites. These, however, are very fragrant, and hummingbirds just love them. If you have a section of these, you will love how the breeze will just bring that scent to you. And the third kind that we're going to talk about is the trumpet lily. These are pretty similar to the Oriental lily, and they do get quite tall, about 5 feet tall, but they tend to be a little less fragrant as the Oriental lily. But the major difference really is the shape of their bloom. They get their name from the trumpet look, being more of a large tube. Time for the more you know. The lily is said to have been created from the breast milk of Hera, wife of Zeus. The goddess Venus was apparently so envious that she caused the pistil to grow through the middle of the flower's bloom. In general, the lily has always been a symbol of purity. Particularly for the death of children, martyrs, and saints, lilies have been sprinkled on the ground or around their graves throughout history to represent purity passing on. This is why lilies are also looked at to be a sign of death as well. No matter the purpose, lilies have always been referred to as the pure flower, and that's the more you know. If you plan to use lilies in your garden, which you should consider planting them in a mass or in groups together. This gives a wow factor to all that intensity of color and magnificent blooms, regardless of the variety that you have. You may also want to consider different varieties of lilies, so that way you have consistent and constant bloom throughout the mid-spring to late summer. I hope you enjoyed our time for the lily. Until next time, I hope to see you out gnoming around.
And welcome back. Again, I'd like to, thank you for being on the show, John Michael. I mean, I know that talking about yourself is a struggle, and I understand it completely, thoroughly, and wholly. But thank you for your writing. Thank you for what you've done, because I think this helps people, and it helps you, and
Yes.
that's what's amazing, and that's what's beautiful about this.
Well, I want to throw it back at you and thank you for what you do, because you've created this venue for people to hear things, and you're touching our community so much with more information than a lot of people realize. And I don't know if you realize how much you touch people.
I don't know, is that a felony? But I'm ching. Anyway.
Oh my goodness, yes.
The special moment brought to you by. Exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll bring you back, for your other books, because I think it'll be wonderful to share. And thank you so much for being on the show, and look forward to seeing you next week.
So